Welcome, Brad. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Looks like got a little boot on your foot there. What's going on?
I'm a week out from my first ever surgery. I had a buniondectomy, which sounds about as gross as it was, and I'm off my feet for 6 to 8 weeks. So I had to hobble in here today. It's my toes are freezing from being outside, but hey, I was really excited to do this.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I saw some, I don't know, it was Instagram pictures you posted, some pretty gnarly scars you're going to have there, looks like.
Yeah, I've got a. I did post a warning, so hopefully you appreciated that because it
Yeah.
was pretty
Did
gross.
you get
Like
one of those
Frankenfoot.
filters that says content graphic, click to expose if you're offended easily?
I'll tell you, it took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out how to make my entire screen black, and so that I could post some words. But I was able to figure it out. So yeah.
Well, the funny thing is,
Yeah.
even if you don't want to see it, like to see that makes you want to see it even more. You're like, oh wait, something's in here. I gotta go. I gotta see
Absolutely.
this.
Yep. Yep.
That's awesome. So do you think the worst is over, or you think the recovery? How you been doing?
I'll tell you what, man. So I had the surgery last Friday morning. I had a nerve block that lasted for about 20 hours, and it's basically an epidural in the back of my leg, and it was probably the most painful part. Until I about 2:30 in the morning, Friday night, Saturday morning, I woke up and truthfully, I didn't know pain like that existed. So it was pretty wild. I took my first couple pain pills then, and yeah, it was an experience that I hope my other foot never needs to be done. But yeah, it's cool. I got it done, and now hopefully here in 6 to 8 weeks, I'll be back to my normal active self.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, it allowed you to have some time off and time off your day job and to be here and to speak with us. So we're, hopefully you recover well and happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Brad and I, we've known each other for probably, I think, over 2 years. I actually looked back at my calendar to see when we had lunch, and it was, I think, the summer of 2016. So about 2.5 years. I think I just quit my day job, and Brad, I think at the time probably had a handful, maybe 10 properties or something, and we met up to kind of just to talk about real estate, and Brad had some questions. I think we were talking about like taxes at the time and things like that, but maybe just go through and I guess introduce yourself and talk about some of the properties you did in the beginning and kind of to where you are now today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John and I, I came across John on Bigger Pockets and was like, hey, there's another guy here that's doing some similar stuff. At that point, I think, John and Brian were a tenth of the size that they are now. So it was, he wasn't too much further along from me. He had made that move of quitting his full-time job. So figured, it was a great opportunity to link up and network with somebody. And I think, our relationship has evolved more into that mentor-mentee. But then I've taken that role with some other people as well. So I'm sure we'll get to that later. But so myself, as John mentioned, I have been investing in Columbus. I'm born and raised in Columbus. I've been investing here since I was about 21. So I'm 28 now. So for about 7 years. And as John said, when we first met, I probably had a little less. I probably had 6 or 7 rentals at that point. But for me, I've always balanced real estate with having a full-time job. And I think that's been something for me that has been, in my mind, both a blessing and kind of a curse. So for me, I've always been able to leverage my full-time job to support my habit, so to speak, which in this case is real estate. And so there's a positive and a negative to having a full-time job. And for me, the positive part is I have consistent cash flow. And so for flippers who are waiting for that house to sell to get their money for their next deal, or they're paying 14 to 16% interest in hard money, I've not really ever had to do that. So banks obviously love the W-2 income. They love that you've got something consistent coming in that every other Friday or every 15th and 30th you can rely on. The downside to that is everybody starts their week with a pie of time, right? And instantly, my pie of time is reduced by 45 to 50 hours, right? That I could be focusing on real estate. And as my career has grown, that pie has toggled back and forth. And, I now work in a role where I travel a lot. So I'm gone probably 45 to 60 days a year, which, may not sound like a lot, but it's 45 to 60 days a year, Monday through Friday, that I'm away from my self-managed rentals that I have to leverage other people to do. And so it's a double-edged sword. For me, it's worked out for the last 7 years, and I'm hoping that it will continue to work out. But I've always felt like Could I be doing more in real estate? Probably. Yeah, probably if I had 45 to 50 more hours a week on top of what I already do to invest. Of course, I think anybody can think that, you can do more. At the same time, from a financial perspective, could I do more? Maybe not, because I've got that loan ability from banks. I've got, whenever I just about drain my bank account to make a deal work, out of nowhere, and boom, now I've got a paycheck hitting that at least gets me to my next first of the month when I get, the 14 incomes from my rental. So that's kind of me. So, right now, as far as what I'm into, I currently own 14 rentals, technically 13 rentals and one short-term rental, which is an Airbnb. That I don't think I've even told John about yet.
No, I haven't heard about this. I think you were talking at one point, your girlfriend turned her place into an Airbnb. I didn't know that you had done that too, though.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So my girlfriend moved in last, I don't know, April or May or whatever it was, and her apartment was just sitting there, and we're thinking, well, geez, she's paying. It was in Grandview. It was a very cute little place. All her furniture was there. It was just sitting, and so we decided to turn it into an Airbnb. And basically, her goal was just to get rent, to just enough money to cover rent. And, she wasn't trying to turn it into a business or anything, but for whatever reason, she caught the bug as well. And I think we all know as real estate investors what that bug is. And that's that income that she never had before. She's making above and beyond the rent. She's having a great time. She's meeting people. She's learning so much. She's a teacher. So, from a business perspective, doesn't have a ton of that experience. And so she's learning that. So much so that as her lease started to come to an end, which was this past December 31st, around September or so, she had been Airbnb-ing for 3 or 4 months, and she came to me and said, I'd actually like to buy an investment property. And, she's a first-time home buyer and gets some incentives for, being a teacher and stuff. So we were able to find her an amazing deal in Old Town East, which is where I've really turned my attention to lately. And we ended up going half in on the deal. And so I was able
nice.
to, yeah. So kind of last minute decision. It came with 2 houses, so it was that standard larger house in the front with a carriage house in the back, and we actually did a rental in the front, which should be ready here in just about the next 10 days. And then the Airbnb went live last Tuesday. And so I own half of that and half of the rental, and she owns the other half. So
great.
That's been an awesome experience so far. But yeah, that's kind of where I've turned my attention to. And then I do a couple of flips a year just to keep me busy.
Right.
On top of some other stuff.
And
So
you're sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So you're a licensed agent too. You got your license what, a year ago or 6 months ago? What was it?
Yeah, good memory. You're right in between. So, I got my license in May of 2018.
Okay.
And it's funny because I actually took all the courses in 2012. It was shortly about a year after I graduated college, and truthfully, I was bored. I had a couple rentals at that point, or I was just starting to acquire rentals, and I really wanted to learn everything that I could about real estate. And so I went to Hondros. I took the classes, and after that, I decided not to get my license. And the reason for that was at that time, as you guys both probably know, HUDs were a big thing. We were able to buy as investors HUDs, and as an agent at that time, you were limited on the number of HUDs that you could buy. And so I decided not, at least with the broker that I was going with, they had some sort of limit if it wasn't, federal or whatever. But I decided not to get my license. So I took the course. I decided, hey, it was a great education. I learned a lot about the other side of real estate that I don't have a lot of knowledge about, but I let it sit. Well, as I started to flip and really buy a little bit more, I saw all the opportunity for these missed commissions and this cost savings. And I thought, well, heck, I've already spent the $1,000 in the 12 weeks to get the license. Right. So I took a Crammer course. It was really a miserable 8-hour course where I just sat there and they re-crammed all the information.
I remember Brian going through those for 3 weeks straight or whatever.
Yeah, I just did. Well, I took the classes at Hondros, but I did them for 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, mine were the same. They were similar. I think I did like every Saturday for 12 weeks.
I did mine 4 days a week for 3 weeks in a row.
Geez.
It was miserable.
God, man, I don't know how you do that. And then this Crammer course was the thing that was like 8 hours long, and they just really. They gave you a mock test and all kinds of stuff. And I went a week later. I took the test and I passed it my first time. So I was pretty nervous because it had been 6 years since I took that technical book stuff that a lot of us don't really care about as investors. But
it's a super hard test, right?
It is. Yeah, the fail rate was like crazy. It was intimidatingly high. Actually, I was like, geez, I'm I'm totally going to fail. I haven't taken these courses in 6 years. But I was lucky enough to pass, and since then, I've done very few deals. Obviously, my focus at this point isn't to be a real estate agent. It's primarily to do my own deals. I have helped a couple people. Obviously, I helped my girlfriend. I was able to make $8 to $10 grand on that deal as an agent, and we just put that right back into the property. So we had some rehab to do, and we're probably about that cost in at this point. It's very, very light stuff, but just kind of paid for that and made that whole transaction easier. She was my second deal, and that still to this day makes her mad that she wasn't able. We had to push her closing by a week, and so
pushed her to number 2. Huh?
It pushed her to number 2, man, and she desperately wanted to be that first deal. And so it was funny though. She was slated to be the first deal by one day, but we had to push it. So she became my second real estate deal as an agent.
I'd be interested to know, how did she re-up her lease to keep that one the first Airbnb going?
No, so she had just signed the lease in January of 18, so she was still on her first year. And look, she probably wasn't allowed to do it, but she took really good care of the property. Everybody was very respectful. She had one person who smoked in it, which was just dumb, but we were able to remediate that. I'm sure you guys know a little about that. But no, she moved in about 3 or 4 months after signing her lease, and then it sat there for about a month and a half while we prepared it. And she had to go buy a little bit of some furniture and stuff, a couple extra sets of sheets, and then she got it up online, and man, that the 1-bedroom in Grandview books. I'll tell you that it books quick too.
Really?
Yeah, it's her rent I think was like $750, and she was Airbnb. She was getting around $1,500 a month on Airbnb. So take out a couple $100 for her cable, electric bill, or stuff like that. But otherwise, she was making money and paying for her lease. So it was a really good deal.
We've talked about it a couple times, and I think that it's something. It's not really a hard goal we've set, but we definitely keep our eye open, and for some property around that area, I expect we might do one of those soon.
Yeah, so we're 2 guests in now at this point on our new Airbnb. Like I said, it went live last Tuesday. We have like over 20 bookings already, but like one was for last weekend. And then we had one on Wednesday night that actually just left yesterday. And her second smoker hit. So this was now her second guest in this new place, and it was the second smoker. So we actually worked with Airbnb. We called them last night, and we're just, we were pretty upset. She put a lot of hard work into this place, getting it ready, and we called, and I'm a co-host, so I was only able to do so much. But we called and said, hey, look, this is unacceptable. It says no smoking, and now the place smells like smoke. And so I reached out to the person who stayed and reminded them of our policy, and they actually paid. So that they paid $100 to have it remediated. But I own an ozone generator, which I recommend any great landlord to have on hand. And so I brought the ozone generator over there last night and got it taken care of. But it's just you have somebody in your house for a year as a long term, or at least a year, hopefully, and you're talking about having 75 to 100 different people in and out of your property in a given year, and it's scary. And if you get a fourplex, you're talking about 350 people in a year in and out of your property, and it's so different than the traditional, place them and collect rent every month. But I'll tell you what, you make more money. You really do. You think about her landlord making $750 on a 1-bedroom. She was making $1,500, and the stats are that I think it's you definitely make, on average, about double what you would on a traditional rental. It's more work. It really.
But your expenses are more. I mean, you got cleanings and some other. You got to maintain furniture and different things that not really standard with it. So it sounds like you make more money eventually, but maybe have a little bit more work on your hand.
Yeah, well, you have to furnish it, right? Which I don't think any of us do. At least, most people in Columbus don't offer furnished rentals, and so you got to furnish it. And then with that comes, of course, people being on your furniture and whatever they do on the furniture. And so, and then to your point, you have to pay for internet. You have to pay for Netflix, all that stuff, like all those costs that you have in your own house. You're basically replicating that at another house because, when somebody comes to an Airbnb, they expect it to feel like home, as whereas when you're renting to a long-term tenant, by all means, you're giving them a shell of an empty property, and they're making it home themselves. So it's very different. We do self-clean at this point just because we have one, but I've got a couple friends with I think 5 or 6 Airbnbs, and they have a company who does it. Our cleaning fee is $40, and so on a one-night rental for, I think it's $65 for a night. I think we bring a little over $110 on one night. So if you have 20 bookings in a night, you're looking at $2,000 on something that might rent in Old Town for about $900. It's a pretty small carriage house. So yeah, it's interesting. It's more work.
I feel like doing it yourself, like the cleaning and stuff, and probably the organizing and resetting toiletries maybe or whatever you're doing, it's probably good at the beginning because you want to eventually create a process manual and you want to know what it's like to do it yourself so that you can teach somebody else how to do it exactly the way that you do it, right?
Absolutely. And I even relate that back to like my own rental, like my long-term rentals, right? I have spent the last, 6 months, and I'm kind of ashamed to say, I don't have a lot of processes in place for my other 13 rentals. And I've realized lately that as I've grown, and again, my career has grown, that I can't do it all myself, and I have to rely on other people. And, I've always known that. I've always had things along the way that have been like, oh, crap, I probably should have had somebody else do that, or I probably should have somebody for this. But I'm stubborn, and I like to keep things close. I self-manage my properties. I don't have any intention on not doing that in the foreseeable future. And yeah, like anything, like any successful business or successful process, there should be something on how you do what. So that if we're going to Italy for 2 weeks in June, and she is so worried about what will happen to this Airbnb, and she wants to block it off for 2 weeks so that it just sits. And I said, absolutely not. We have 6 months to get this thing ready to the point where somebody else can run it for 2 weeks. It's not rocket science. Maybe we'll make a little less money because we got to pay somebody to run it, but it's better than no money.
Right.
2 weeks is potentially $1,000.
Right.
And so for us, there's value to paying for somebody to take things on that maybe you can't do yourself. In this case, we're not going to be in the country to do it.
Right.
Right. That's good to learn that. I mean, I think you want to scale. You want to not be just doing one property. You already got 13 others. So how do you scale that? And you got to put processes in place to make sure that can happen.
Yeah, and I think like when you were talking about, working a full-time job and kind of the pros and cons, and you think that you could do a lot more if you didn't have your full-time day job, and that's probably true. But I think that you said you don't have a whole lot of processes. I think you do. You just don't realize it because like you're working 40 to 60 hours a week. You have to have processes in place to manage 13 properties if you're working 40 to 6 hours a week. So maybe it's just the processes. Maybe they're just not written down. You have stuff because you're at work 8, 9, 10 hours a day. If something happens, you have processes to send people and certain people to take care of things. You're talking about just probably putting them in writing and maybe making them a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, that's a good point. So look, at the end of the day, having good people to me is absolutely number one. So I have got a team I focused on building over the last 7 years. They're not exclusively mine by any means, but they're people I trust, and they're people that my tenants trust. And so if I get a text at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday and I'm about to head into a meeting to say my furnace stopped working, okay, have you done this, this, and this? Yes, I have. It's still not working. Okay, let me reach out to my HVAC guy. Shoot him a text. Hey, Lee, I need you over there sometime today if you can in the next 12 hours. And he's there, and he sends me a bill. It works out great. And I trust him. I trust that he's not going over there and flipping on a switch and sending me a couple $100 bill for some sort of part that he didn't actually do. So that to me has been I'm not an HVAC guy. I'm not a plumber. I'm an investor. I'm a landlord, and I'm an HR guy. So I know how to work with people. And so for me, it's been constantly evolving with my team as well. There have been, I'm sure you guys know, so many people along the way that don't make the cut. And it seems like, unfortunately, more don't than do. But those people that make the cut, keeping them close is, I think, 10 times more important when you are, at a 50-hour disadvantage a week because you don't have that time to go out there and find 10 new HVAC guys. So for me, it's really just been having a good team and knowing what to do with each situation and staying calm. Tenants are a lot more dramatic than you probably are. And they reach out and, hey, I've got my whole house is flooding. You go over there and, you got a washer dripping. It's like, yeah, geez, it's not really that bad. So being able to sift through the crap is a good skill you should have as an investor.
One of the things we've talked about doing, we haven't actually done it yet, is, and I haven't worded it this way, but making a process manual for each of our tenants too. And to say, like you just said, they text you, hey, I've got my furnace stopped working. you ask them some questions, then you text the HVAC guy. What about cutting that part out? Just saying, hey, when you move in, if the furnace goes out, do A, B, and C, and if those don't work, do D, and that's text Lee. And then you don't even know about it till Lee sends you a bill, or, that's something that I'm, trying to think through, like, how do we avoid some of these steps by just writing them out for the tenant and then let them directly contact the vendor we trust.
Yeah, no, that's a great call. I think so just to back up on where I've come with this efficiency, I started my HR career for a Japanese-based company, and those kinds of companies that are, it was headquartered in Japan, had an office here in Columbus, and what I learned from that company was just about efficiencies. Like and once you feel like you're as efficient as you can get, become more efficient. And so I feel like right now I'm relatively efficient, but things like that are what make me think about there is absolutely still more stuff I can do to save time. And as you scale, obviously that becomes more and more important. So right now with 13 plus 1 or whatever, it's working. But I also realize that as I become more involved and I get to 20 and 25 and so on, I'm going to need to become more efficient. And then once I reach that point, become more efficient from there. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, speaking to what Brian was talking about kind of giving tenants a outline or something, steps to take when something goes wrong. We kind of went down that road a little bit. And the issue that we had was tenants would, handyman would come, they'd fix whatever, they'd leave. Well, the next time they had a problem, they would just call that handyman because they had their cell phone number now, right? And so now we have the handyman calling us like, hey, this tenant called us. Do you want us to go over? And we're thinking like, well, we don't even know what's wrong. They didn't submit a work order, a support ticket, nothing. And so we don't even know why you're going there. So it's almost like you put that process into place, then you have to create another process inside that process to deal with kind of the intricacies of the situation.
Sure. And I think, anytime that you try to over engineer something, it's death by efficiency, right? Or death by process. So you still want to keep control of your property at the end of the day. Like these are your houses and what these tenants do inside them ultimately impact you. So there still has to be that same level of, a similar level at least of like keeping your finger on the pulse. But I'm sure there's definitely things that all of us could do to just break that down a little bit further and see how we can make it easier for the tenant and obviously for you.
Right. I love how you said that, over engineering it, because I mean, it's truth processes. If you make them too detailed, then as soon as an exception happens, everybody has to have a meeting and we have to talk about how to deal with the exception. There's a very fine balance between, too much detail and not enough. You want to be somewhere in between. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there.
Yeah. And I think, one thing I have learned with rentals and ultimately tenants, again, I've been in the business of people since college, where I went to school for HR and have been doing it ever since, the last 10 years or so, is that you have to – I forgot what I was going to say.
We can cut it out. It's fine.
Okay, hang on. No, it was something good too.
One thing that Brad and I think when we first started meeting, I tried to drill into Brad's head is to pay for quality. And I mean, there were certain things I think with the accountant that you were using and some contractors that you were using and things. And I mean, I was maybe, I don't know, a year or two ahead of Brad. So we had already been down this road, hiring the cheapest people possible. And we had a situation with an accountant as well that just did an awful job, and we were kind of stuck and didn't know where to go. And we found the accountant that we have now, which I think you also use. But I love your story about the first time that you met the accountant that I suggested for you. When I first suggested him, the first thing Brad said was, "Oh, is he gonna charge me $2,000 to do my tax returns this year?" And I said, "Look, I don't know, but he's gonna do them right. Why don't you go talk to him?" And what happened?
Well, it's so John will never let me live this down, but. There are services you really do need to pay for. So the first time I met with this guy, and yes, we still do use the same accountant, he looked at my tax returns, and God love him, he's an accountant, right? So they've got a different kind of personality, and he looks at it and he goes, "These are wrong." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I've been paying a CPA to do them for the last couple of years." Granted, the CPA had very little expertise in real estate. She was an older gal, probably in her 60s, 70s. Possibly 80s, and so she didn't know all these. Yeah, well, she's pretty old. So I took my tax returns to this guy, and I said, "Hey, here's the last couple years. Take a look." And literally within 30 seconds, he's like, "Wrong." Okay, I'm like, "Oh wow." So he identified thousands thousands of dollars of savings for me, based on, you know, a couple different loopholes or credits or whatever. I don't know. I'm not an accountant by any means, but so I texted John and I said, geez, this guy just saved me a boatload of money, but I'm afraid to get the bill on what it's going to be. And he said, you know what? As long as the bill is less than what you're getting back, who cares? I'm like, you know what? You're right, because it was money I didn't have. And over the years, man, have I ever learned to just use the right people the first time, because otherwise, you know, paying for something twice is a lot more expensive than paying the first person a little bit more the first time to do it right. And I've learned that with contractors. I've learned it with so many different services. And, you know, most recently, and I know John likes this one because it has made me a lot more money, is using professional photographers. When we put up the Airbnb last Tuesday, guess who was there on Monday? A professional photographer. And, you know, it's $150. And they go in, they take the best angles, they make the property look amazing. Now, the property's great, it's nice, but, geez, does it look good on pictures? And so, you know, John sent me a link to one of his properties that was, I don't know, 5 or 6 houses down from one of mine. And the pictures were light years away. And he was telling me what he was renting it for in comparison to me. And, you know, with all due respect, I think my property was every bit as nice and it was the same size. And I'm like, oh, how are you getting that? And he's like, I'm attracting higher quality tenants through my pictures. So as fate would have it, I ended up bringing a professional photographer in. I paid $150 to have it done, and sure enough, that property rented for, I believe it was $175 a month more than what I was getting before. $125, so it went from $950 to $1075. So within 40 days, I had made my money back, and then now I've got these professional pictures forever, by the way. So assuming the property doesn't drastically change, I can use these things. And so I have done that on every property since. And honestly, it's not even a question anymore. I've got this photographer company coming out next week to take pictures of this rental that we're ready to list up. And I think it adds more money.
For sure. I mean, we update ours pretty regularly. If like I said, if the property changes, you don't want people going in and saying, oh, but the pictures show this. And, you know, we've actually painted the walls a different color now. Yep. Whatever. I mean, the pictures and the way we market makes a big difference in who we attract, and so that's one of the things that we really try to strive for.
Yep. One of the even like talking about multifamilies, you know, we have 4 units and a 6 unit, 12 unit, 16 unit. Most of them are, all the units are pretty similar. So you pay for pictures for one unit. You can use those pictures for years for every unit you want to rent because it's so similar. We have the same fixtures and the same materials and stuff in every property. So, you pay once and you can use them. We have rentals that, we've been using the same pictures for a few years because, we go in, usually we paint, the carpet, we use the same as we did 3 years ago. And, it's a little bit of an upfront cost, but it definitely pays off.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're managing as many rentals as you guys are, or heck, even me, but coupled with the full-time job, any areas you can save time and just convenience. All of our times, it's worth money. And to me, if I can save money or save time by using a professional service, and again, I have seen the benefits. It's been over a year now since I rented that property, and $125 a month times a year. Think about that. It's over $1,000 on a $150 investment that, by the way, I was fighting John on. And I was saying, John, I could take they're pictures, man. Come on. He was just, trust me. So I tried it on one house, and yeah, you got me, man. Again.
I think the first time I ever talked to you, I had called you about a tenant that you had, who we were using as a contractor, who ended up going on to stealing a $4,000 refrigerator from us,
and then ditching you and your property, right?
Yep.
We have a fun connection that way.
Yeah, that was the first time I met you, Brian, and it wasn't pleasant terms by any means, but she ended up stealing from me too. Heck, when it's funny, how many refrigerators does she need? Because when she left my property,
she took your refrigerator.
She took my refrigerator too. So she's got she must have a
I'm
large
sure
need
yours
for
was probably not as nice as the refrigerator she stole
no.
from us. And actually, she didn't steal it directly from us. She actually went to Lowe's, and back then we allowed a couple of contractors to buy off of our account that we trusted that we shouldn't have trusted, and she ended up getting caught on video buying a refrigerator, even on video, picking it up later that day, and I think she went on to be charged with a felony because I don't know what came of that. We never saw the money from it, so
I'll never understand that. You know, she did like 2 or 3 projects for us too,
and she did pretty decent. I mean, I was not unimpressed by her. I mean, it was rental quality. It wasn't, it wasn't anything that you find in a $500,000 house, but she worked diligently, and I don't know if she just started to go through a hard time or what, but she turned sour quickly.
Yeah. But I mean, she could have grown with our company. I mean, if we could have worked on quality, we could have given her more jobs. She had some people working with her and stuff, and she decided to take a different route and, take a quick paycheck, and unfortunately now a felony. And so she's out the job, and we're out a contractor. It's, it's lose-lose situation. Why would you not continue working, grow a business, make money, legitimately? I don't get some people. But.
I mean, we ended up learning from it. We don't allow really any contractor on our accounts anymore. We have one guy that we trust, and we've worked with him for about 2.5 years. He's never stolen. He's been very honest and upfront. Every time he does something that's kind of not really good or whatever, he breaks something, he'll call me, hey, this just happened and I'm going to take care of it or whatever. So he's the only guy, and I'll actually pay him to buy for other contractors and deliver to them because I don't want them on my account buying.
Yep. And that goes back to what I said earlier with just people being number one. I mean, it sounds like you guys have somebody that you are treating like gold, like to you. I mean, he's your most important asset right now. Anybody who is outside of Columbus right now may not realize the war for talent, as I've been calling it, because good quality contractors are, I mean, they're just so hard to find. And I'm actually in the process right now of looking for. I've got one right now that's been working on one of my flips who's been doing a really nice job. On budget is kind of a loose term. On timeline's kind of a loose term, but the quality of work has been very good. And Brian, you said something that I think is important for people to know. And you said she does good rental quality work. And I think it's important for investors to realize that there's a difference. Who I have on my rentals is a lot of times not anybody that's anywhere near my flips. Because there are houses for sale, so many people flipping that people know, buyers know when something is done for a quick buck. And so having quality people on your flips, higher quality people, I should say, you should never have low quality on your rentals. But, I definitely have rental quality people. And it's funny, I actually made the mistake recently on this flip I'm doing up in Delaware right now of putting a rental quality contractor who I knew very well. He had done tons of rental work for me at a rental quality. I put him on this flip because I had nobody else. And I am paying for it now to the tune of thousands of dollars because this guy I've been working with to do this, who is flip quality, or I like to call it rehab. To me, flip has this weird connotation that you're trying to make a quick buck. So I'm rehabbing this house, and I'm having to pay, thousands more dollars because he's going back and correcting the work of the last guy. And so, it's again, it's a lesson, and you take those lessons and you hopefully you apply them in the future, and you never have to make that same mistake twice. So having people that, you have to know their skill sets. I knew that this guy was rental quality work. I still was like, maybe he's ready for flip quality. No, not even close.
What are some things that you've got coming up now, like now that we've discussed to where you are? What's your plan for this year? What's happening in the future for you?
Yeah, so gosh, I'm hoping 2019 is my biggest year yet. I say that every year, and 2018 was a great year. For me, I've got a lot of projects in the works. Right now I have a major flip that I've got tons and tons of money into listed. We've had a lot of traction in the last week. We've had over 7 showings in the last week. Expecting an offer today. So that will really free up some of my capital. I am lucky enough to not ever take on hard money lenders. I've actually never used a hard money loan. I'm able to self-finance. Once again, there goes that. Some of that benefit from working that full-time job. I do use banks by all means, but they're at a much lower interest rate, 4 to 6%. I think I paid as high as 7 once, and it killed me. So I couldn't imagine doing the 12 to 14. But hey, everybody's got their method. So right now for me, once that flip sells, I'm rolling that money right over into my first ever development project. And so that flip came with a side piece of land. And in Old Town East, land is at a premium right now. It's obviously an established neighborhood, over 100 years old. There's not exactly a ton of land except for houses that have been demolished over the years. This property came with the front half of a very long lot. It's 30 by 180, so it's a big lot. But if for some reason the front half was separately parceled from the back half, and so I bought this front lot just on a prayer, thinking, and I actually bought it from my partner. So this flip was the first time I ever took on a partner, and that's been its own interesting learning experience. But I bought that. He wants nothing to do with a new build, and so I bought that land from him. And I ended up finding out that the back half of the land was owned by the land bank. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I know it's not listed, but what can we do? And they were like, hey, even though it's not listed, we're willing to sell. And so I've went through this gauntlet of a process. It was like an 8-step process to buying this land, and I am actually closing next Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. on this back half of land. I can hardly wait.
It's very specific.
I've got to hobble in there and close on this land so I can start my first ever development project. But I had a 2,350 square foot house designed with a beautiful 600 square foot garage in the back, and it's a big lot. It's narrow, obviously, but it's going to be perfect in Old Town East. New builds are selling like hotcakes there, and so that's on docket. Once I sell my flip, I'm going to move forward with that development project. And I mentioned a couple times I am wrapping up a flip in Delaware. This has been my first time taking on a project that's, gosh, what seems like 10 hours away, but it's really only 45 minutes. So that's something that I know you guys have gotten creative on as well. Is you can't just look at Columbus. There's Dayton. There's Mansfield. There's all these other places that you can make money. And so I've ventured out into this Delaware house. I found this deal off market from a buddy of mine, and so that house has been it was on the back burner for a while as I finished this major flip again. And I've put all my eggs into that basket, and as I've gotten some money from my rentals, I've been able to start to fund the rehab from the Delaware house, and that is scheduled to hit the market next Friday. So we're a week away. I'm doing my walkthrough on Sunday. It's being clean Tuesday. Pictures, professional pictures, by the way, John, are on Wednesday or Thursday, and then we're going to list it on Friday. So really hoping that one. It's going to be right around that 150, 160 mark, which is like a sweet spot right now in Columbus for houses to go quick. So really hoping that sucker follows the 9-day on market average that Delaware's doing, because I got a lot of money tied up into that as well. And then my ultimate long-term plan for this year is I'd love for that new build to be built and sold, hopefully by the end of 2019. That's kind of my goal. Also realizing the timing, I may have to hold on to it into the new year of 2020. Don't want to, but timing is everything in real estate. I'd like to cash out of flips, to be honest. They're becoming a lot of work, and with this full-time job, they're getting up there. Now, I say that, and the first time a deal comes along, I think you guys know how it is.
Oh, yeah. You can't turn it down.
Yeah, you can't turn it down, man. I mean, come on. But right now, the longer-term focus is picking up a smaller apartment unit. So hopefully I will cash out on these three deals and walk away with enough cash, and again, don't really have to pay any banks back, don't have to pay any investors back. So should walk with some good cash. And I want to 1031 all of that into some sort of apartment unit, and whether it's 10 higher end units or 20 C-class units, whatever that might be, whatever the deal is at the time. That's my ultimate goal. So rentals are where I see my longer term future. But again, can't ever pass up a good deal on a good quality flip.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
All right.
That about wraps it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm really glad you came in. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about that we hadn't addressed at this point?
I think the one thing that I want to say is I get so many questions. I know John does too. I'm Brian, I'm sure you do as well. It's like, how do you get started, right? So I think back to my 21-year-old Brad self, and I think that I got creative. My parents don't have a lot of money. I grew up very blue collar, and I loaned $25,000 from my dad's credit card, and I paid all the fees. It didn't cost him anything, but I loaned the money to buy my first condo that I flipped to start to self-fund myself. And so I guess the advice I would leave somebody who's just like, man, where do I get started, is get your first deal and do whatever you have to do to get that deal. There are infinite ways to get creative to get a deal, but it's so intimidating to think about buying that first property. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to own a home that ultimately somebody else is hopefully going to live in, or I'm going to flip, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Man, that first deal feels good. And it leads, just like a speeding ticket, it leads quickly into the second. And so it's just, my encouragement is, I don't care if you're broke, if you make $10 an hour, whatever it is, find a way to get that deal. I like to think there are I can count on one hand how many deals I've lost because of financing, because the money's out there. The money is out there. You have to find a way to get it. And to me, it translates directly into how successful you're going to be, is how creative you get with your financing. And if you're willing to do whatever it takes legally to get the money, you're going to be successful in real estate.
Yeah, I think the key here, just getting your first deal. A lot of people think, oh, I got to make a lot of money on my first deal. A lot of people pay big bucks for an education. And so even if your first deal doesn't make you money, it's going to make you a lot more knowledgeable and give you a lot more experience on, the process, what you're going to be doing, what needs to be done. And so I think it's important just to even take that step, even if you don't think you're going to make very much money, and you might even lose some money. Yep. You're not going to pay, or you might pay tens of thousands of dollars for an education. We know people that pay tens of thousands of dollars to real estate education people just to get knowledge, and you can gain all that knowledge just doing the work yourself in your first deal as well. So
I agree 100%. I think we've talked all through this session about the lessons we've learned, and sometimes the lesson is buying a house and messing up. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I've lost I lost $21,000 on a house one time, and it sucked. But it was a nice little tax write-off. But otherwise, I have lost money, and so it happens. And don't let that scare you. That was my fourth house, and I could have easily packed it up and said, hey, three's good, but I didn't. And thank God I didn't. I think John and I talked. Maybe it was probably a little before John, but I've learned some lessons. And there are some houses I should have walked away from and have made less money than I traditionally target. But I've learned some lessons from them. And it's all constantly evolving, and just going for it, man. I can't say enough of just getting that first deal under your belt so that you know what it's like to go through the process. Even if it's just the acquisition part of it and going through closing and working with people and all that stuff, like there's so much value to just getting that first deal and hopefully the second one to follow.
Yeah, I think you're a great example for people. I mean, working a full-time day job, and I mean, you were young when you bought your first one, and I'm thinking back to like when we first met, and I think you reached out to me, to have lunch and whatever it was, and I know you were looking maybe for some answers from me, but the reason that I really wanted to sit down with you and share some of my experiences, because I could tell you were motivated. I respected what you were doing, because I mean, you were a lot younger than I was when you bought your first property. So I mean, how old were you when you bought your first property?
I was 20 when I bought my first personal house,
right.
Which I actually rented out 3 of the bedrooms to some of my college friends.
Right.
That got me started on that. Man, I can actually make money in real estate.
Oh yeah.
And then I was 21 when I bought my first flip.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, I think I was
scary.
I was 26 maybe when I bought our first investment property together and stuff. But I got a lot of respect for you. We appreciate you being here. I think what you're doing is great, and I think it's it's awesome that 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, you were looking to me for advice, and now there's a handful of people that are going to you for advice. And I know you've grown and learned a lot in that time, and that's awesome.
Thanks for hobbling in here today, and do keep us posted on how your Airbnb goes.
I sure will. If you guys have any questions, or if anybody has any questions, certainly not an expert, but feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share my learnings. I'm sure my girlfriend would have some more learnings, but we're certainly happy to help.
How do people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is through texting. Again, as busy as I am, I get a lot of random phone calls. Some of them are from John and Brian. They're wholesalers, you know what I mean? I'm just kidding. But the easiest way to get a hold of me is through texting. It's 614-309-2158, or by email. It's clariziob@gmail.com, so my last name, first initial. And as an agent, I'm happy to help you find your first property. It's certainly not a selling point here or anything, but I know what I'm doing, and now I can do it myself, and it feels great. So
awesome,
thanks for having me, guys.
We'll put your email in the show notes. Great, appreciate it. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. You too.